In a lively village, nestled between tall trees and flowing rivers, life moved at its own peaceful pace. The village was surrounded by thick forests where the air was fresh, and the songs of birds filled the mornings. The rivers sparkled under the sun, and the sounds of laughter and chatter echoed through the narrow paths. It was a place where nature and people lived in harmony. But not all was perfect in this village. Among the villagers was a young woman named Ankiru. She was kind-hearted, always willing to lend a helping hand to anyone in need. Ankiru had a beautiful soul, but she didn't look like the others. She was a bit larger than most of the other girls in the village, and her appearance often made her the target of cruel jokes. Some of the villagers, especially the children, would call her Mountain Ankiru, teasing her because of her size. This nickname hurt Ankiru deeply, even though she tried to smile and ignore it. Despite all the mocking, Ankiru never let it change her sweet nature. She always helped her family and greeted others with a warm smile. But deep down, she wished people could see her for who she truly was, a kind and capable person with much to offer. The village, however, only saw her as an outsider because of how she looked. Ankiru came from a humble family, but they were rich in love. Her parents, though not wealthy, worked hard every day to provide for her and her siblings. Ankiru's mother always told her that she was special, that she had greatness inside of her, even though Ankiru couldn't always see it. "You are destined for something wonderful," her mother would often say, stroking her hair with care. These words, full of love and encouragement, helped Ankiru hold on to hope, even when others made her feel small. Despite the love and support from her family, Ankiru struggled with insecurities. She wished she could be like the other girls in the village, slimmer, more accepted, but what others didn't know was that Ankiru had a secret she kept hidden deep inside. From a young age, she had learned a special skill from her late grandmother, a woman known in the village for her wisdom and connection to the land. Ankiru could communicate with nature. She could hear the whispers of the wind, feel the trees speaking to her, and understand the animals around her. Her grandmother had taught her to listen closely to the world, to trust her connection with the earth. Though she kept this skill to herself, Ankiru knew it was something powerful. She believed that one day, her hidden gift would help her fulfill the greatness her mother always spoke of. But for now, it remained a secret, locked away within her heart. In the village, Ankiru's size became a topic for gossip. The villagers would whisper behind her back, and even in front of her, they would mock her. They called her Mountain Ankiru, making fun of how big she was, as if her size was something to be ashamed of. The children were the worst. They would laugh and tease her, running past her and calling her names. Sometimes, they would even throw mud at her, or trick her into falling for silly pranks. Ankiru tried her best to ignore them, but it hurt. It hurt because deep down, she wanted to fit in, to be seen as beautiful and worthy like the other girls. The adults in the village weren't any kinder. They would see Ankiru helping her family with chores or working in the fields, but instead of praising her for being strong and helpful, they would shake their heads and say things like, "She will never amount to anything," or "She's too big to ever be graceful." They didn't understand her heart or her hidden talents. They only saw her appearance and judged her for it. It felt like Ankiru was invisible to the village, like no one could see the kindness inside her or the special connection she had with the world around her. Still, Ankiru tried to hold her head high, but each mocking word and every cruel laugh chipped away at her confidence, leaving her feeling more isolated than ever before. Despite all the teasing and harsh words from the villagers, Ankiru refused to let it break her spirit. Every day, she woke up early to help her family with the chores. Whether it was gathering firewood, tending to the garden, or carrying water from the river, Ankiru worked hard without complaining. She was determined to be useful and to take care of the people she loved. Her family could always count on her, and even though the villagers didn't appreciate her, her parents always made sure she knew how special she was. Ankiru's kindness shone through in everything she did. She treated everyone with respect, even those who mocked her. While the others might ignore the needs of the animals or the land, Ankiru had a deep respect for nature. She always noticed how the birds sang early in the morning, or how the trees whispered in the wind. But there was something even more incredible about Ankiru. She could talk to animals. It was a secret she kept hidden from the village, passed down to her from her late grandmother. Ankiru could sense the feelings of animals, and sometimes it felt like they spoke to her in a way no one else could understand. She could calm a restless goat or guide a lost bird back to its nest, all with just a few soft words. But she kept this special gift to herself, not wanting to give the village another reason to laugh at her. Still, deep inside, Ankiru knew that her connection with nature was powerful, and that one day it might be the key to something bigger than she could imagine. One day, a new figure enters the village, a young man named Chiki. He was a strong and proud hunter, known for his skill with a bow and arrow. Cheek was admired by everyone in the village. The men looked up to him, and the women couldn't help but notice his charm. He loved to boast about his hunting adventures, telling grand stories of how he had defeated dangerous animals and survived terrifying challenges in the wild. But despite his popularity, Chike wasn't kind to everyone. He especially enjoyed mocking Ankiru. He would often make fun of her size and call her Mountain Ankiru, laughing at her for being different. He couldn't understand why someone so soft could have any worth. But Chike had his own reasons for behaving this way. Deep down, he wanted to prove to everyone, especially to himself, that he was the bravest, strongest man in the village. To do this, he decided to take on a dangerous challenge. He planned to venture into the forbidden forest, a place filled with rumors of wild beasts and powerful spirits. No one dared to enter it, but Chike was determined to show that he was fearless. "I'll be the hero," he thought. "Everyone will see my strength." As he prepared for the hunt, he couldn't help but laugh at the thought of Ankiru. She would never understand what it meant to be truly brave. But little did he know, his journey into the forest would change everything. The forest surrounding the village was a place of mystery and fear. It was thick with tall trees and tangled vines, so dense that even the sun had trouble breaking through. The villagers spoke of it in whispers, believing it to be cursed. They said that strange creatures roamed there, wild animals so fierce that even the bravest hunters wouldn't dare enter. There were rumors of spirits too, invisible forces that haunted the trees and made the air feel thick with danger. No one, except for a few brave souls, ever ventured too far into the dark heart of the forest. To them, it was a place of death, a place to avoid. But to Ankiru, the forest had always been more than just a scary place. Her grandmother, before she passed away, had often spoken of it with a sense of mystery. "You have a special connection to the forest, Ankiru," she would say with a soft smile. "One day, the forest will call to you, and you will understand it in ways no one else can." Ankiru didn't fully understand what her grandmother meant, but the words stayed with her. Sometimes, when she stood at the edge of the forest, she felt as though it was calling to her, like a quiet whisper she couldn't quite hear. It made her feel uneasy, yet oddly drawn to the shadows beneath the trees. Little did Ankiru know, her grandmother's words were not just a comforting story. They were a prophecy. The forest was about to play a big role in her life, and soon she would discover why it had always felt so familiar. It was during the village's annual festival, a day full of music, dancing, and laughter. The whole village gathered in the open square, enjoying the festivities. But for Ankiru, it was a day of discomfort. As she stood near the edge of the crowd, Chiki, the village's most admired hunter, spotted her. With his loud voice and bold attitude, he didn't hesitate to make her the center of attention. "Look at Mountain Ankiru," Cheek mocked, his voice carrying over the laughter of the crowd. "Does the ground shake when she walks?" The people around him laughed. Some even joined in with cruel jokes. Ankiru felt her face burn with shame. She wished she could disappear, but instead, she stood there, holding back tears, knowing that no one would come to her defense. The laughter echoed in her ears long after the festival ended. That night, as Ankiru lay in her small room, staring at the ceiling, she felt the weight of the day's humiliation. But just as she began to close her eyes, something strange happened. From the direction of the forest, she heard a soft whisper, almost like a breeze rustling through the trees. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, but then she heard it again, clearer this time. The whisper was calling her name. Ankiru. The voice seemed to reach deep inside her, as if it was inviting her, urging her to listen. Her heart raced. She didn't know why, but she felt a pull, a strong sense that she needed to go to the forest. It was the same feeling she had whenever she thought about her grandmother's mysterious words. Something was happening. Something that would change everything. It was as if the forest was waiting for her, calling her to step into a world she had always known was there, but never understood. That night, as the whispers from the forest echoed in her mind, Ankiru knew what she had to do. She was tired. Tired of the teasing, tired of being ignored, and most of all, tired of hiding who she truly was. Her grandmother's words came back to her, like a gentle voice in the wind. "You are stronger than you think, Ankiru. The forest will call to you when the time is right. Trust it." With a deep breath, Ankiru made up her mind. She would face her fears, and she would finally stop hiding. She could no longer let the cruel words of the village hold her back. If there was a part of her that was meant to be something special, something that could change her life and the village's view of her, she would find it. Ankiru quietly got out of bed and went to the small wooden chest her grandmother had left behind. Inside, she found an old map of the forest, one that her grandmother had drawn years ago. It showed paths that no one else in the village knew, paths that led deep into the heart of the mysterious forest. She tucked the map into her pocket and put on a warm cloak, just in case the night turned cold. As she tiptoed through her house, she looked back at her sleeping family. Her mother's soft breathing gave her comfort, but also a pang of guilt. Would they understand why she had to go, she wondered. But there was no turning back now. Ankiru left the house quietly and started toward the edge of the village. In the distance, she could see Chike, the proud hunter, gathering his things as he prepared to venture into the forbidden forest. He didn't know she was watching, and he didn't know that tonight, Ankiru would follow him. Not out of fear, but out of the need to prove to herself that she could face whatever the forest held. As she moved through the dark village streets, the soft light of the moon guided her way. Her heart was racing with both excitement and fear. She didn't know what would happen when she entered the forest, but she knew she couldn't live with the same doubts anymore. With each step she took toward the dark trees, Ankiru was not just walking into the unknown, she was walking toward her own strength. As Ankiru moved deeper into the forest, the trees grew taller and the air felt heavier, almost as if the forest itself was watching her. The sounds of the village faded away, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves and distant animal calls. She stayed close to the path, her heart beating fast with both fear and excitement. She had no idea what dangers lurked ahead, but she felt a strange sense of calm. It was as if the forest was guiding her, just like her grandmother had said. Meanwhile, Chike, unaware of Ankiru's presence, marched forward with his usual confidence. He was used to the forest, boasting about his hunting skills and bravery. But tonight, he didn't realize that the forest was not just a place of adventure, it was full of unpredictable dangers. He walked too far, deeper into the dark heart of the woods, where the animals were wild and the spirits of the forest roamed free. Suddenly, there was a low growl from the shadows. Chike froze, his eyes widening. From the darkness, a huge lion appeared, its golden eyes glowing in the moonlight. It was the kind of lion that every hunter feared, fast, strong, and ready to defend its territory. Chike drew his bow in panic, but the lion was too quick. In a flash, it pounced, knocking Chike to the ground and pinning him there with its powerful paws. Ankiru, hiding behind a tree, watched in shock. Her heart raced as she saw Chike struggling beneath the lion. This was the moment she had feared. The forest was indeed dangerous, and she was not prepared for this kind of danger. But then, something inside her stirred. Something deep and ancient, just like her grandmother had told her. Ankiru stepped out from behind the tree, her feet barely making a sound on the forest floor. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She could feel the air around her, the rhythm of the wind through the leaves, and the heartbeat of the lion in front of her. She reached into her soul, tapping into the strange, secret skill her grandmother had taught her. Ankiru could communicate with the animals, understand their feelings, their fears, and their needs. With steady hands, Ankiru whispered softly, speaking in a language only the forest understood. She spoke to the lion, not with words, but with the calming energy of the earth. "Please," she whispered, "this man is not your enemy. He is lost, and he does not understand." For a moment, the lion growled again, clearly confused. But then, slowly, it began to calm. Its claws loosened from Chike's chest, and it stepped back, its powerful body still tense, but no longer attacking. Ankiru moved closer, her voice soft and soothing. The lion, sensing no threat from her, finally turned and disappeared into the forest shadows, leaving Chiki unharmed but shaken. Chiki lay on the ground, gasping for breath, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had never seen anything like this before. He looked up to see Ankiru standing there, her face calm, as if she had always belonged to this forest. What did you do?" Cheek stammered, still in shock. His arrogance and pride were shattered in that moment. He had been so sure of his strength, but it was Ankiru, the one he had mocked, who had saved his life. Chiki stood there, staring at Ankiru, his mind racing. He could barely believe what had just happened. A few moments ago, he had been trapped under the lion, and now here was Ankiru, calm, collected, and standing as though she had always been part of the forest. His heart pounded, not just from the fear of the lion, but from the shock of what he had just witnessed. "Ankiru, how did you do that?" he finally managed to ask, his voice trembling. Ankiru didn't answer right away. She walked slowly towards him, her eyes soft but steady. She could see the confusion and awe in Cheek's eyes, and she knew it was time to reveal the truth. She had kept it a secret for so long, hiding the skill her grandmother had taught her. But now, standing in the heart of the forest with Chike, it felt right to share her secret. "My grandmother taught me," Ankiru began, her voice gentle but strong. "When I was little, she used to tell me stories about the forest, how the animals, the trees, and the wind all have voices. She told me that one day I would learn to hear them, to understand them. She said I had a special connection with nature." Chike's eyes widened as he listened. He had always thought of Ankiru as just a kind, gentle girl, someone to make fun of, someone who didn't belong. But now he saw her in a completely different light. She wasn't just the mountain Ankiru the villagers laughed at. She was something more, something powerful, something that could speak to the very heart of the earth itself. "I never understood it until now," Ankiru continued, her voice becoming more confident. "The forest calls to me. It has since I was a child. I can feel the animals, the trees. They all communicate with me if I'm willing to listen. It's not just about hearing their sounds. It's about understanding their needs, their fears, and their wisdom." Chike looked at her, still trying to comprehend what she had just said. "So you can talk to the animals? Like, really talk to them?" Ankiru nodded. "Yes, I can. But it's not just talking. It's about listening too. My grandmother taught me how to connect with nature, how to protect it. I never wanted anyone to know because people wouldn't understand. They would laugh, like they always do." Cheek felt a deep sense of shame wash over him. He had mocked her so many times, calling her names and making fun of her size, her kindness, and her differences. But now, standing in front of him, was a young woman with an incredible gift. A gift that had saved his life. He realized he had been wrong about her, about everything. "Ankiru," he said, his voice quiet and sincere. I'm sorry. I was foolish. I never saw who you really were." Ankiru smiled, but there was no anger in her eyes. Instead, there was understanding. "It's okay, Cheek. I never needed you to see me. But now, maybe you'll see the forest differently too." Cheek nodded slowly, his heart heavy with the weight of his words and actions. He had learned something important that night, something he would never forget. Ankiru was not just a girl from the village. She was a protector of the forest, a keeper of nature's secrets, and someone who carried a strength he could never have imagined. The next day, Chiki returned to the village, but he didn't feel the same. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by a deep sense of humility. As he walked through the villagers noticed how different he looked. His head wasn't held high in pride, but lowered in thought. He had something important to do. When Chike reached the center of the village, where everyone had gathered, he stood quietly for a moment. All eyes were on him, curious about his sudden change. The village had always seen him as the proud hunter, the one who could do no wrong. But today, he wasn't just Cheek the hunter. He was Cheek the changed man. Taking a deep breath, Cheek stepped forward. "I have something I need to say," he began, his voice softer than usual but filled with sincerity. "I was wrong. About Ankiru, about everything. I've been cruel, arrogant, and disrespectful. I made fun of her, called her names, and believed things that weren't true." The villagers whispered, surprised by his words. They had never heard Cheek speak like this before. They had always admired him for his bravery, but now they were beginning to see a different side of him. Cheek continued, his eyes now looking at Ankiru, who was standing quietly in the crowd. "Yesterday, Ankiru saved my life. I went into the forbidden forest to prove my bravery. But I didn't understand the dangers of the forest. I got trapped by a lion. I thought I was going to die. But Ankiru, she came to my rescue. She spoke to the lion, calmed it, and saved me. I couldn't believe it. She has a gift, a connection with nature that I never understood." Cheeky paused, his heart heavy with the weight of his apology. "I was wrong to ever mock her. Ankiru is strong, more powerful than I could ever be. And she's brave in ways I didn't see before. I'm sorry for all the hurtful things I said." There was a long silence as the villagers took in what Cheeky had said. Many of them looked at Ankiru with new eyes. She had always been kind and quiet, but now they saw her as someone extraordinary. Cheeky had made a powerful confession, and in doing so, he had opened their eyes to Ankiru's true strength. Ankiru stepped forward, her heart filled with a mixture of emotions. She smiled gently at Chike, her eyes full of understanding. "It's okay, Chike," she said softly. "I know you didn't mean to hurt me. People don't always see what's inside until they have to. I'm just glad you understand now." The villagers, who had once mocked Ankiru, now looked at her with respect. They whispered among themselves, realizing how wrong they had been. Ankiru wasn't just the girl they had once ridiculed. She was someone who could teach them about nature, about strength, and about kindness. And they could see that now. Chike, feeling lighter than he had in years, turned to face the villagers. "From now on," he said, his voice stronger, "I will no longer mock Ankiru. I will honor her and her connection with the forest. She's not just a member of this village, she's its protector." The village fell silent for a moment, and then, one by one, the villagers began to nod, their expressions changing. Some even smiled at Ankiru, a small but meaningful sign of their newfound respect. Chike had transformed. He wasn't the same boastful hunter who had once laughed at Ankiru. He was now a man who had learned the value of humility, kindness, and true strength. And the villagers, too, had learned something important. Sometimes, the most unlikely people hold the greatest power. At first, the villagers were unsure. They had always thought of Ankiru as just a kind, quiet girl who spent most of her time with animals and the trees. They didn't understand her deep connection with nature. When Chiki told them about how she had saved him in the forest, many people still couldn't believe it. After all, how could someone so different from them, someone they had once mocked, be capable of something so extraordinary? But as the days passed, something changed. Ankiru's actions spoke louder than words. She didn't ask for praise or recognition, but instead continued to help her family, tend to the animals, and care for the land. The villagers began to notice that whenever Ankiru was around, the animals seemed calm and the plants flourished. It was as though the village was thriving because of her quiet presence. Ankiru's bond with nature became more and more obvious. Whenever there was a problem with crops or animals, the villagers would turn to her. When a new calf was born weak, it was Ankiru who knew just how to care for it. When the farmers faced trouble with pests, Ankiru would speak softly to the land, and somehow the pests would disappear. People started to whisper about her gift, realizing it wasn't just a skill, it was a true connection with the natural world. Slowly but surely, the villagers started to respect Ankiru. They watched as she helped guide the village through times of trouble, using her knowledge of the forest, the animals, and the land. She never once acted out of pride or anger, despite how she'd been treated in the past. She simply did what she believed was right. One evening, during a village meeting, the village elder stood up. He had been one of the first to call her Mountain Ankiru, laughing at her size and her quiet nature. But now, he cleared his throat and spoke with great respect. We've seen the truth of Ankiru's strength, not just in her kindness, but in her connection to the earth and the creatures that live here. We were wrong to dismiss her. She has shown us that true strength comes from within, from the way we care for the world around us. The villagers nodded in agreement. The children, who had once teased her, now looked at her with admiration. Some even began to follow her, eager to learn from the girl who could speak to the animals and heal the land. The adults, who had once dismissed her, now sought her advice and guidance. Ankiru's ability to understand nature became an invaluable asset to the village, and they knew that her knowledge would protect them for generations to come. As the village flourished, so did Ankiru's reputation. She was no longer Mountain Ankiru, the girl who was mocked for her appearance. She had become Ankiru, the protector, the healer, and the one who had a deep and powerful bond with the earth itself. The villagers came to see her as a treasure, someone who not only understood the land, but also knew how to protect it. And in doing so, she taught them all that the greatest strength lies in caring for the world and the people around you. As time went on, Ankiru's role in the village grew stronger. People began to see her not just as someone with a special gift, but as a true leader. She didn't demand attention or force her ideas on anyone, but her wisdom and calm presence naturally drew people to her. Ankiru had a vision for the village, a vision of harmony between humans and nature. She knew that if the village was to thrive, they had to care for the forests, rivers, and animals just as much as they cared for their crops and homes. Ankiru started teaching the villagers what she had learned from her grandmother. She gathered them in the evenings and shared stories about the forest's secrets, how the trees spoke through their leaves, how the rivers carried messages, and how the animals responded to kindness and respect. She showed the farmers how to plant their crops in ways that wouldn't harm the soil. She taught the hunters to take only what they needed and to give thanks to the animals. Slowly, the villagers began to see the world through Ankiru's eyes. Under Ankiru's guidance, the village transformed. The forests, once feared and avoided, became a place of balance and life. The villagers stopped cutting down trees recklessly and instead planted new ones. The rivers, which had been drying up due to carelessness, began to flow strongly again because Ankiru taught them how to protect the water's path. Even the animals, which had once been seen as threats, seemed to trust the villagers. It was as if nature itself recognized Ankiru's leadership and responded in kind. Ankiru's rise wasn't just about her connection to nature. It was also about her ability to inspire others. People who had once doubted her now looked up to her with respect. They saw her not as someone who was different, but as someone who had strength, wisdom, and courage. Ankiru showed them that being a leader wasn't about being the loudest or the strongest. It was about caring for others and standing up for what was right. Soon, the village became known for its harmony with nature. Travelers from other villages came to learn from Ankiru and to see the balance she had created. Ankiru welcomed them all, sharing her knowledge with anyone who wanted to listen. Her kindness and patience touched everyone she met, and her reputation as a wise and compassionate leader spread far and wide. Ankiru had risen far beyond the expectations of those who once ridiculed her. She wasn't just a protector of the village, she was its heart. Through her guidance, the villagers learned that the earth was not something to conquer, but something to cherish. And in doing so, they became stronger together, with Ankiru leading the way. One year, the village faced a terrible drought. The rain stopped, the fields dried up, and the rivers that once flowed freely were reduced to thin trickles. Crops withered, and the villagers grew desperate as their food and water supplies began to run out. Fear spread like wildfire, and whispers of panic filled the air. What would they do if the drought continued? The villagers turned to Ankiru, hoping she might have a solution. She had become their leader, and now they needed her more than ever. Ankiru, calm but determined, remembered something her grandmother had once told her. Deep in the forest, hidden beneath thick trees and vines, was a spring that never dried up. It was a sacred place, protected by the spirits of nature. Ankiru had seen it once during one of her walks, but she had kept it a secret, knowing it was special. Now she knew it was time to reveal its existence. This spring could save the village, but finding it again would not be easy. Gathering a small group of villagers, Ankiru led them into the heart of the forest. The journey was long and difficult, with the sun blazing above and the air thick with heat. Many of the villagers wanted to turn back, but Ankiru encouraged them to keep going. She reminded them to trust in the forest and its gifts. As they ventured deeper, Ankiru used her connection with nature to guide the way. She listened to the whispers of the wind, watched the movements of the animals, and followed the signs that only she could understand. Finally, after hours of searching, they arrived at the hidden spring. Crystal clear water bubbled up from the ground, flowing gently into a small pool surrounded by lush greenery. The villagers gasped in amazement. It was as if they had stepped into a different world, untouched by the drought. The cool, refreshing water was a gift, and they knew it was thanks to Ankiru's wisdom and courage that they had found it. The villagers quickly gathered water and carried it back to the village, saving their crops and livestock. Word of Ankiru's leadership spread even further, and the people's gratitude toward her grew deeper. Ankiru, however, reminded them that this was not just her achievement. It was the forest's gift, and it was their responsibility to care for it. She taught them how to use the spring wisely, ensuring it would remain a source of life for generations to come. Through her knowledge and connection to the land, Ankiru saved the village once again. She proved that even in the face of great challenges, there is always a way forward if one listens to the wisdom of nature and believes in their own strength. Ankiru, who was once ridiculed and called cruel names, had now become the heart of the village. People who had mocked her for her appearance and dismissed her as unworthy were now her strongest supporters. They saw her not as Mountain Ankiru, but as their protector, their guide, and their savior. Her kindness, resilience, and deep connection with nature had transformed the lives of everyone in the village. They no longer judged her by her size, but by the size of her heart and the strength of her spirit. The villagers began to celebrate her courage with songs and stories around the evening fires. Children who had once played cruel pranks on her now gathered around, eager to hear her speak of the forest and its wonders. Adults who had doubted her now sought her advice on how to live in harmony with nature. Ankiru's name became a symbol of hope and strength, and her actions taught the village valuable lessons about kindness and unity. Through her journey, Ankiru proved that true strength comes from within. Her ability to rise above cruelty and embrace her unique gifts showed everyone that what makes a person special is not how they look, but the good they bring into the world. Ankiru's story became a legacy for future generations, reminding them to treat others with respect and to always find courage in difficult times. As the village thrived under her leadership, Ankiru often thought of her grandmother and the lessons she had passed down. She knew her grandmother would be proud. Standing beneath the stars one quiet evening, Ankiru smiled, feeling at peace. She had turned her pain into purpose and transformed not just her life, but the lives of everyone around her. Her story ends with a simple truth. Kindness, resilience, and the courage to embrace one's true self can change the world.